Good morning. In today's headlines, the House Oversight Committee is digging in on their investigation into President Biden. New demands came in from Committee Chair James Comer yesterday.
Super PACs are raising record amounts of money. What does it mean for the election and American politics? We'll break things down for you.
Air travelers face thousands of delayed or canceled flights, with some stuck for days in crowded airports, and peak July 4th travel hasn't even hit yet.
The Allen, Texas Police Department releases body cam video of an officer taking down an active shooter. We have the footage.
A new study found that obesity changes the brain. There are even findings that show similarities to Alzheimer's. So how should you treat weight loss now, and what does it mean for your health?
Good morning. Welcome to NTD. I'm Kevin Hogan.
Good morning. I'm Evelyn Lee. Today is Thursday, June 29th.
Evelyn, a lot going on today. Human remains were recovered from the week-long search of the Titan submersible. What a tragedy.
Yeah, and we will bring in an expert to speak about super PACs and their influence.
Oh yeah, I'm looking forward to that interview you have. And you know, the Oversight Committee's request is big because not only does it address whether President Biden is compromised, but it also seeks to make corruption laws stronger going forward.
But pundits do say that it's based on secondhand allegations from a single source and that it's being hyped. Yeah,
a lot of chatter going on. Now, keep in mind, AG Barr's DOJ had these allegations and seemingly did nothing with them.
It all comes down to the questions of whether the Justice Department has a double standard in the way it handles the Bidens and former President Trump.
That's a good point there, but hey, my birthday's coming up and so is the country's. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, a lot of reason to celebrate, and we're close to the holiday weekend, which also means busy travel.
With the recent chaos, nearly 3,000 flight delays and over 800 cancellations, NTD's Daniel Monahan has more on stranded travelers stuck in the mud of air transport gridlock.
The mind-numbing waiting game of travelers trapped under the fluorescent lamps of airport waiting lounges. An ominous sign heading into the long July 4th holiday weekend. One that is shaping up as the biggest test yet for airlines struggling to keep pace with surging passenger numbers. Mrs. Lee arrived in Chicago on Tuesday from Iceland. She's trying to get home to Los Angeles, but her flight never arrived, and she was forced to spend a night in a hotel.
I mean, that's a stressful, you want to be home, after your travel. It was a very nice memory.
Facing another 2-hour delay and unsure whether her plane will show, Lee is ready to leave all the traveling behind for a while.
Home is the best.
Tia Hudson has been stranded for days.
I missed the wedding. I missed the wedding Sunday.
Whose wedding was it?
My mom.
I'm so sorry.
Hudson's trying to get to New Orleans, but canceled flights are just part of the problem.
And they lost my luggage. They told me my luggage was in Dallas, Texas.
Diane Brown and husband Bill have been delayed for 2 days. Their destination, Florida.
Disaster. But everybody's calm, I think, which is a good thing. They keep canceling everything.
Brown says there are simply no flights. Sana Everskog should have been on a flight to sunny Guatemala 24 hours ago.
But from what I've seen, people have been really calm and nice about it. But I think people are tired, and staff super tired as well.
Huge crowds, bad weather, airline crews unable to reach their scheduling offices have all contributed to the mess. The number of air travelers could set a pandemic-era record over the holiday weekend. The FAA expects Thursday to be the busiest, with more than 52,000 total flights. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
Smoke from raging Canadian wildfires is wreaking havoc on broad swaths of the U.S.
Yeah, I remember when New York got hit so hard, it was just like you couldn't even see. Now, air quality has taken a serious blow, even pushing one city into the hazardous zone. NTD's Daniel Monahan again has more on the silent but deadly border breach.
Hazy, smoke-filled skies hovered Wednesday over the Midwest and East. Millions of Americans were urged to limit outdoor activities. Wildfire smoke is linked to higher rates of heart attacks and strokes, and more emergency room visits for respiratory conditions. Much of the Midwest was under an air quality alert, expected to last into Thursday or longer. The EPA even put Detroit in the hazardous range, while Chicago, Indianapolis, and Pittsburgh all have very unhealthy air. Air quality alerts triggered by drifting smoke were also in effect for New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C. In total, more than 100 million Americans were dealing with poor air quality by Wednesday afternoon. Canada is wrestling with its worst ever start to wildfire season. On Wednesday, there were nearly 500 active blazes, about half of which were out of control, spread from the Pacific to the Atlantic coasts. Toronto had the worst air of all major cities in the world on Wednesday afternoon. 87-year-old Toronto resident Mr. Thacker says he doesn't go out unless he has to.
But I had today doctor's appointment, so I had to go out.
Juliet Young says she's lived in Toronto for 47 years.
This is the most polluted time, so it's becoming worse.
Nearly 20 million acres have burned down so far. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer is digging in on his investigation into President Biden and his business dealings.
Comer demanded yesterday that the Treasury Department hand over reports related to an alleged bribery scheme involving Biden and a Ukrainian energy firm.
Comer sent a letter to Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen. He says it's necessary to find out if foreign actors targeted the Biden family, if Biden is compromised, and if there is any threat to national security.
He wants the suspicious activity reports by July 12th. Comer also says the committee wants to craft laws to strengthen financial disclosure requirements and transparency because of the allegations against Biden.
Election Watch is filing a complaint with the Federal Election Commission over alleged Chinese ties to Act Blue. Act Blue is a nonprofit that helps facilitate donations to Democrat candidates.
That's over discrepancies and alleged fraud concerning Act Blue. Election Watch found many Act Blue donations have gone through the names and home addresses of elderly Americans, apparently without their knowledge. Here's what independent journalist James O'Keefe had to say about the lawsuit.
Now, included in that lawsuit will be evidence that over 60% of the money involved in this is apparently coming from China. Act Blue is feeding a lot of money to other PACs like Emily's List, Color of Change PAC, just to name a few. Much of this information, through Election Watch, came from internet tracing, internet traffic patterns, looking at where the transactions are coming from and where they're going to.
O'Keefe says the lawsuit also brings up receipts of large money transfers through banks and debit card processors. Election Watch plans to file a lawsuit after waiting the required 120-day period. And talking about money in elections, super PAC spending is surging right now, and it's been growing every year. According to Politico, they've already spent more than $14 million in the primary, while it was just a bit under $1 million at the same time in 2015. So what are super PACs and what is the issue here? We're bringing in Raven Harrison to discuss this. She's a political strategist and a former congressional candidate. Good morning, Raven. Let's start at the beginning of this. Just very quickly, can you give us an idea why super PACs were even created with regular political action committees around as well? What was the need there?
Well, good morning. I would say that super PACs, the way to understand it is they are political action committees that are allowed to raise unlimited funds. So when you have at the federal level $3,000, $5,000 limits for individual contributions to a candidate's campaign, super PACs have kind of stepped in to fill in the gap so they can raise unlimited funds. And these campaigns are getting more and more expensive and they're going longer. It's created a perpetual campaign season.
Right. Now, and with that, what is the dynamic that super PACs create? Like you mentioned, the big money involved and the amount that's being raised every year. So how does a candidate basically assure they can keep up with the spending level of their opponent through super PACs?
Well, super PACs came around in 2010, and they're not going anywhere anytime soon. They are the lifeblood. Money is the lifeblood of a political campaign. So they've made it that they're so integral that there's really no way for a candidate to have a viable, robust campaign without having an affiliation with a super PAC. They are literally tied into fundraising. They are tied into door knocking, canvassing for voters. So in layman terms, you will not only make it to the dance, if you don't have a super PAC, you won't even be able to hear the music. This even comes down to candidates being able to make the debate stage, and it's poised to spend billions of dollars in 2024 for the presidential election.
And what about the dynamic? What, candidates tapping into those resources and super PACs, they probably, what are their interests here? How does that go together?
Well, they almost don't. So when the candidate has to have the backing of a super PAC, and you're talking to the tunes of hundreds of millions of dollars. So Future Forward is a super PAC that was put together to go against President Trump, over $111 million spent. And on the Republican side, $231 million spent to get to these. So basically what it is, it's really just a way of controlling the dynamic of these campaigns. In theory, with the super PAC, the candidates are not able to interact with this PAC. However, that kind of money, $81 million spent in losing campaigns to get jobs that pay anywhere from $175,000 to $275,000 a year, are creating multimillionaires and people beholden to corporate interests.
Who are those big donors for super PACs?
Well, that is the issue right there. So most times they are corporations. You have Blackstone tied to some of these super PACs, but what you then give rise to is something that's called dark money, which is where the donors become anonymous and obscured, which is something that people are fighting about now in the political scape, because it basically means you don't know who has bought and paid for your candidate, but they are essential in this election cycle and have been since 2010.
Well, so this is an issue at the forefront, and many criticize the FEC for not enforcing the law properly. Why do you think there isn't more done about it?
I think that they would try to, but the simple fact is that they have been testing the limits of the FEC for quite some time, since they've been in inception. I mean, you have these PACs, for instance, one which controlled by Mitch McConnell, who is the leader in the Senate, but it is designed to decide which candidates are able to even make it to the debates, make it to the party, and they are really brazen now in their attempt to test the limits of the FCC.
Thank you so much for breaking things down for us here. Raven Harrison, I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
Stay tuned for more coverage. The Chinese spy balloon that traversed the U.S. was carrying some U.S. tech. Preliminary findings disprove the Chinese regime's claims of it being a weather balloon. We have the details.
And tradition and religious beliefs collide with so-called progressive ideas. NTD speaks with Rabbi Yaakov Menken on the struggle to hold ground in the face of mounting attacks.
It's just clear as day. The media, whether it's broadcast, cable, or print media, has become extremely biased. And I started looking online for alternative ways to get information. And I saw an ad for a free trial. And I looked at it and I said, Epoch Times. I mean, come on, this is end of days type of stuff. I mean, what are they going to be talking about here? And I said, well, it's a free trial. Let me dig in. Is it giving me both sides? Is it giving me an objective point of view here? I have looked for opportunities to see where they might be biased, and I don't find it. It has given me a level of trust in media that I didn't think I'd ever get back. I love the Epoch Times because it has renewed my faith in the idea that a reliable, responsible, non-biased source of information is available. And I can say that I love it because of that.
Looking for a healthy and smooth-tasting brew? Drop by Days Coffee Roasters today and explore our wide selection of specialty-grade, small-batch roasted coffee. Home to North America's first enzyme-fermented coffee, we source a wide selection of specialty-grade coffee beans from around the world, and our baristas are ready to craft your customized brew. Visit Days Coffee at 28 North Street, Middletown, New York. Come experience a brew like no other.
It's all good, baby.
Is it really all good?
If you love me enough to routinely test your handyman skills,
not to mention the strength of your marriage, then of course you'll visit nhtsa.gov/the-right-seat to make sure I'm in the right car seat.
Award-winning filmmakers Stephen Barber and Matthew Housley, along with producer Tamara Henry, bring you the world's most dangerous paper route. Never-before-seen images from legendary Stars and Stripes military newspaper.
Don't worry about the bullet with your name on it. Worry about those flying around that say to whom it may concern.
I was a member of the West Point class of 1974. Stars and Stripes was part of our daily existence. In a way, the hometown newspaper of the U.S. military.
I think it's the most important newspaper in the world.
I had a choice between going to Armed Forces Network or to Stars and Stripes, and I picked Stars and Stripes.
Join Vanilla Fire Productions as they head downrange to Afghanistan, Iraq, and Kuwait to follow the world's most dangerous paper route.
These people put their lives on the line continuously.
Good to see you. We're going to that tragedy in the Atlantic. Authorities are analyzing the wreckage of the Titan submersible that was brought back ashore, and they say they found presumed human remains. Here's more.
The U.S. Coast Guard said on Wednesday they received debris and evidence recovered from the Titan submersible. Their statement reads, United States medical professionals will conduct a formal analysis of presumed human remains that have been carefully recovered within the wreckage at the site of the incident. The Canadian mothership Horizon Arctic was back in port in St. John's, Newfoundland on Wednesday with debris from the destroyed submersible. It's the first time the wreckage was seen since the catastrophic implosion. Both U.S. and Canadian authorities are investigating the implosion of the vessel. The U.S. Coast Guard has convened a Marine Board of Investigation, the highest level investigation. They will transport the evidence to a port in the U.S. for further analysis and testing. The Coast Guard said there is still a substantial amount of work to be done to understand the factors that led to the catastrophic loss of the Titan and help ensure a similar tragedy does not occur again. The owners of the remotely operated vehicle that searched the ocean floor say they have successfully completed their offshore operations. The Titan imploded during its descent to view the Titanic wreckage on June 18th. All 5 on board were killed.
The Chinese spy balloon that passed over the U.S. this year used some American technology. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. They cited unnamed U.S. officials with preliminary findings from a closely held investigation. The officials said analysis from U.S. defense and intelligence agencies found the balloon had commercially available U.S. gear. That was along with more specialized Chinese sensors and equipment. It was able to collect photographs, video, and other information and transmit it to China. The findings support the conclusion that the craft was meant for spying, not for weather monitoring, as the Chinese regime claimed.
More on China. Missouri's Attorney General will be investigating a possible Chinese Communist Party outpost in the state. The so-called Chinese Service Center is one of 7 such outposts identified in the U.S. NTD's Jeremy Sandberg reports.
Congresswoman Ann Wagner notified Missouri's Attorney General about the Chinese Service Center last week. She tweeted out at the time, the Chinese Communist Party has been trying to expand its influence globally, and we must put a stop to any efforts to gain a foothold in America. Wagner is the U.S. representative for Missouri's 2nd Congressional District. Chinese state media reported there are at least 7 of the so-called overseas service centers operating in the U.S. They are in St. Louis, Missouri, St. Paul, Minnesota, Omaha, Nebraska, Charlotte, North Carolina, Houston, Texas, Salt Lake City, Utah, and San Francisco, California. The centers are run by a Chinese regime intelligence service called the United Front Work Department. Missouri AG Andrew Bailey replied to Wagner on Wednesday and vowed to immediately investigate the matter. Bailey called the possibility of a CCP outpost in the state deeply concerning and acknowledged the threat posed by the CCP is very real. The centers work with China's Ministry of Public Security. The DOJ has asserted the ministry conducts covert intelligence operations in the U.S. That includes illegal transnational repression schemes. Other GOP lawmakers also expressed concerns about the CCP service centers last week. Senators John Cornyn, Pete Ricketts, and Deb Fischer say they are communicating with the FBI about the centers. Jeremy Sandberg, NTD News.
The latest ban on gender transition procedures struck down by a court. Federal judges in Kentucky and Tennessee yesterday blocked state laws banning transgender drugs for minors. In the Kentucky case, U.S. District Judge David Hale granted a preliminary injunction against the state law. He determined that the ban violates the constitutional rights of the 7 transgender minors who sued. In the Tennessee case, U.S. District Judge Eli Richardson also cited the constitutional right to equal protection. The judge stopped short of also blocking the ban on gender transition surgeries for youth. Both the Kentucky law and the Tennessee law ban access to puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for minors, but they haven't gone into effect yet. 20 states have passed laws banning gender transition procedures, and recent lawsuits have prevented such laws from taking effect in 7 states.
Religion and parental rights under attack. NTD's Daniel Monahan spoke with Rabbi Yaakov Menken on the so-called progressive push to undermine tradition.
Menken discussed the difficulties Orthodox Jewish schools are encountering in New York, with the state exerting ever greater control of the education system, including private schools.
This isn't just the fight over parental control over what the sort of indoctrination now being delivered in American public schools. This is state agencies wanting to change and override what parents choose in terms of their own children's education.
The rabbi says the state is turning the screw through increasingly stricter hour requirements, even for elective subjects, but believes the true target is not the mind, but the soul.
They want to limit the amount of religious education, dilute the religious education, make sure people focus on other things than their religious education. It's a fundamental value of ours that teaching religion specifically, to your children is a biblical obligation.
According to Menken, not just parental rights are under attack in America, but religion itself at a level never seen before.
People are being called hateful, bigoted, and phobic for simply observing the same biblical laws that they've been following for generation after generation. We have, in particular, for thousands of years.
Menken says the conflict is being driven by a so-called woke movement that carelessly tosses around labels like hateful and bad for everything that came before it.
The United States was not created by people seeking liberty. On the contrary, it was created by people who wanted to own slaves. You know, that sort of thing, going back to the very beginning of America, saying that it was hateful, when, in fact, you look at the Founding Fathers and what they wanted to create in this new country, it was an obvious step up. It was real progress.
But Menken says such movements have no interest in progress. Their true desire is to tear down what America already has.
I think there's a lot of funding for this coming from outside of America. I think the Chinese and the Russians should be very delighted to watch American values and American liberties get torn down, and just America get weakened in general.
The clash between Jewish tradition and modern culture has recently played out in the courtroom. New York's Yeshiva University has been engaged in an ongoing legal battle for refusing to recognize a campus LGBT group. It says doing so would infringe on its religious beliefs. Daniel Monahan, NTD News.
80% of American voters believe human trafficking is a major problem and we're not doing enough to fix it.
That's according to a new poll. Just how bad is the situation and what can you do to help? NTD's Faye Corder brings us the story.
The vast majority of American voters say the human trafficking crisis is a major problem and that not enough is being done to fight it. Human trafficking refers to trading human beings, often using them for forced labor and sexual exploitation.
That may look like a young girl from Guatemala is told that she's being offered a job opportunity to come to the United States with a visa, maybe to work as a nanny or to work in a restaurant or to work for a company. But upon arrival, she realizes that she's actually going to be forced into prostitution. That's the prototypical scenario.
Kate Lincoln Goldfinch is an immigration lawyer who helps trafficked victims. She says the victims lose their liberty. They may have their passports taken away from them, and they may be forced to work long hours.
They think that if they run away, they will be captured and harmed, or their families being threatened. A lot of people know that their captors know exactly where their children are.
The State Department estimates between 15,000 and 50,000 women and girls are trafficked every year. Worldwide, human trafficking is the fastest growing crime. Some of the reasons include high profits, high demand, and low risk. The COVID pandemic made it grow even more.
In some countries, they saw a 5,000% increase in reported crimes. And in the United States, trafficking looks different than what it looks like overseas. Overseas, it's very dark, right? You see kids in cages. In the United States, you see it as prostitution.
Austin Shamlin is the CEO of the Traverse Project, which identifies, maps, and disrupts trafficking networks internationally. He says trafficking is hard to fight because the laws are unclear.
For the United States law enforcement to prosecute a case, they have to find a nexus back to the United States. And a lot of what I refer to as producer countries, a country that would produce a victim of trafficking, their laws haven't caught up. And it's just kind of a way of life in some of these countries.
If you're a trafficking victim, survivor, or witness, or you think you have a tip regarding human trafficking, you can call the National Human Trafficking Hotline at 1-888-373-7888. This is a 24/7 hotline funded by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Hotline staff can immediately help survivors with their situation. Faye Quarter, NTD News.
In the United States, human trafficking really is a very significant issue. All 50 states have reported cases.
It's hard to estimate the exact scope of the problem. These human traffickers want to be as secretive as possible. They don't report numbers. The numbers we do have, which is 15 to 50,000 women a year, are likely lower than the real number.
And if you want to help solve the problem, it's very likely there are local organizations near you that are dedicated to fighting trafficking. You can quickly find them on a Google search, and then you can call them and ask them what you can do.
And coming up, we dig deeper into how Wagner's mutiny in Russia may have sent chills through Beijing.
And massive riots in France after the deadly police shooting of a teenager during a traffic stop. President Macron holds an emergency meeting. We'll have the details after this break.
The stories that need to be told, the voices that need to be heard, the truth that you need to see. Get unbiased and in-depth news. Don't miss a beat. I'm Stephanie Cox. At NTD, we're here for you.
What is China like really? Is it defined by its giant economy, an oppressive government, or its people? By the worst persecutors or the most courageous freedom fighters? We're lifting the veil to look at global impacts and how close the regime is to your doorstep. From eyewitnesses and analysts, get the facts. Here on China in Focus.
Good to have you back. An eye-opening event, Wagner's mutiny in Russia, may have sent chills through Beijing. Though the incident faded quickly, analysts in China are left wondering, is Beijing too close to Russia?
Just 3 months earlier, Chinese leader Xi Jinping told Putin about what he called changes not seen for 100 years, adding, quote, "We are the ones driving these changes together." Putin agreed.
So how is last weekend's Wagner uprising exposing risks for China? Let's zoom in.
China is Russia's top trading partner and closest ally. At the heart of their relations is a shared opposition to what they see as a world dominated by the United States and the expansion of the NATO military alliance that threatens their security. But the weekend uprising has unsettled Beijing's leadership, according to a top U.S. official on Monday.
So this is something that for the Chinese side, this is of great concern because they have huge interests in upholding stable and predictable relations with Russia. They have economic interests, they have political interests, and they want to cooperate with Russia at the, for instance, in regional forums and at the multilateral level.
While Chinese state-run media cheered Putin's swift efforts to stamp out the rebellion, even some in China, where critical speech is tightly controlled, have started to question Beijing's bet on Russia.
So a stable Russia is really important for China. And now they saw that Putin might not be as stable as it appeared.
Wen T-sung is a political scientist at the Australian National University.
I think she likely still prefers Putin to the alternatives
in Russian politics. But Beijing now has more reasons to have more reservations and to become more transactional in its dealings with Putin's Russia.
China has sought to play down the weekend's events and voiced support for Moscow, with which it struck a no-limits partnership shortly before Russia invaded Ukraine.
Moving over to Western Europe, French President Emmanuel Macron held a crisis meeting with senior ministers today. That's after riots spread across France over the deadly police shooting of a teenager during a traffic stop. At least 150 arrests were made in the violent protests. Here's the story.
It was a rare criticism of law enforcement by the president, hours after the incident triggered unrest on Tuesday night. Prosecutors did not identify the victim, but according to a neighbor and acquaintance of the family, he came from an Algerian family and his first name was Nael. 31 people were arrested and dozens of cars were burned, mostly in Nanterre, Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin said. Prosecutors say the 17-year-old failed to comply with an order to stop his car. The officer fired and he subsequently died from his wounds. A video shared on social media, verified by Reuters, shows two police officers beside a car. One shoots as the driver pulls away. A homicide investigation has been opened. The two officers, aged between 38 and 40, were experienced, according to Darmanin. Paris Police Chief Laurent Nunez told BFM TV that the justice system would need to decide whether or not their actions were appropriate. Residents of the Paris suburb say they're saddened by the event.
I can't understand it. Refusing a traffic stop. I mean, if you are stopped by police, just stop. It's always hard to lose a child, but I don't understand.
It's tragic. We're still talking about human life. So I don't know. I'm saddened for the family.
I think that starting a riot, like what happened yesterday, will not change things. We don't solve things by rioting. We should debate, talk and find common ground with the government regarding what's happening with the youth. Maybe find them jobs.
There have been 2 fatal shootings during traffic stops in France so far in 2023.
Now let's get to some headlines from around the world.
Ukraine has arrested a man suspected of treason. He's accused of helping Russia carry out a missile strike on a busy restaurant. 12 people were killed in the attack. Officials say the man filmed cars with military license plates in the restaurant's parking lot and sent the footage to Russian special services.
The UK is introducing a law today meant to stop British lawyers from advising Russian companies on certain business deals. That includes trade deals between global companies or international money lending. The move builds on existing sanctions imposed after the invasion of Ukraine last year.
Leaders of the world's top central banks said in a meeting yesterday that further policy tightening will be needed to tame stubbornly high inflation. But they added they believe it can be achieved without triggering outright recessions. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said consecutive interest rate hikes are still on the table.
Turkey condemned a protest outside Stockholm's central mosque where a man tore up and burned a Quran. Swedish police initially granted permission for yesterday's protest, but later charged the man with agitation against an ethnic or national group. Demonstrations in Sweden have offended Turkey, whose backing the Nordic country needs to gain entry to NATO. Hey, Kevin, how would you feel if you suddenly turned a year younger?
Okay, Evelyn, what are you trying to say? No, I'm just kidding. I am interested. Tell me more.
So here's the thing. Starting yesterday, South Koreans did just that. New laws took effect that require using only the international method of counting age, replacing the country's traditional method. And here's how it works.
This was how the traditional age system works. People are deemed to be a year old at birth, and a year is added every January 1st. Since the early 1960s, the country has used the international norm of calculating from 0 at birth and adding a year on every birthday for medical and legal documents. But many South Koreans continue to use the traditional method for everything else. Some, like Choi Hun-ji, are happy to be, quote, younger again.
I'm supposed to be 30 next year in the traditional Korean age system, but with this new age system, I became 2 years younger. It's just great to feel like you're getting younger, and I feel a bit of distance from becoming 30. I'm so happy that I can celebrate this year's birthday once again in a younger age.
According to a government survey conducted in September 2022, 86% of South Koreans said they would use the international age in their everyday life when the new laws took effect. Another age system exists in South Korea for conscription, school entrance, and calculating the legal age to drink alcohol and smoke. A person's age is calculated from 0 at birth, and a year is added on January 1st. Officials said that method would remain for the time being.
So this is actually a traditional concept in China.
You would know.
Yeah, exactly. Traditional Chinese culture before communism has influenced surrounding countries for centuries. So when a baby is in its mother's womb, from its conception, it has life. So that's why when the baby is born, it is considered 1 year old.
Oh, okay. Well, but I guess if you just use the Chinese system, then you just look younger. Or well, then you would look, you look older for your age, right?
Oh, so much going on. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, it is interesting. And so coming up, another derailment in Southern California, and this time it's a passenger train.
And a Delta airline flight was forced to make an emergency landing in North Carolina yesterday. Find out why, that story and more after the break.
Shenyun Creations, the streaming platform from Shenyun, featuring world-class dance, past programs, and all original music. Masterclasses, behind the scenes, comedy, and more. Explore shenyuncreations.com.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Hey, I told you enough of that.
But look, this is different. It's Ganjing World.
Ganjing World. Family-friendly entertainment.
There is a whole big cottage industry for racism. If racism went away, a lot of people would be unemployed.
The mob during the Minneapolis riots following the death of George Floyd. A bunch of white thugs, frankly, burning down the city's traditional Black and Asian business district while chanting Black Lives Matter. It was literally surreal.
Oh, but we black. You gonna tell me how to be black, right? Y'all don't care about black people.
I am not African. I am 100% American.
Y'all the same Democrat Party who've been terrorizing black people from the beginning. And now y'all got the audacity to say Black Lives Matter?
Their bread and butter and their bottom line, their raison d'etre and everything that they're trying to do depends upon people being kept in these boxes.
Welcome back. Another train derailment. This time, it was an Amtrak passenger train in Southern California. At least 16 people were injured in the accident yesterday. The passenger train collided with a truck that was blocking the tracks. Amtrak officials said it partially derailed but remained upright. One official said about 200 passengers and 13 crew members on board were evacuated. The driver of the truck was taken to a trauma center. Another person was taken to a medical center with a minor medical emergency. The local fire department said the other passengers appeared uninjured. Amtrak says it will coordinate with local authorities to investigate the incident.
Luckily, most of those people weren't hurt. Another incident that had passengers shaken up yesterday took place in Charlotte, North Carolina. A plane was forced to make an emergency landing when part of its landing gear malfunctioned. Delta Flight 1092 left Atlanta Wednesday morning and arrived in Charlotte roughly 90 minutes later, but the landing was anything but normal. According to a statement from Delta, the plane's nose gear didn't go down, forcing an emergency landing. The plane had 96 passengers. No injuries were reported.
The runway at Charlotte Douglas International Airport was forced to be closed for about 12 hours yesterday. It has since reopened. The Atlanta-based carrier says an occurrence like this is rare and that flight crews train extensively to safely manage situations like this. The Allen Police Department in Texas released body cam footage yesterday of a shooting in early May. 9 people were killed, including the shooter, at a Dallas area shopping mall.
But first, a word of caution. Some of the following footage may be disturbing to some viewers. Here's the story.
The video starts out with the unnamed officer talking to a mother and her 2 kids. Then multiple shots can be heard in the distance.
Okay, all right, you be good.
It's always the
seatbelt.
Wow.
Get going, get moving!
As the officer runs through the outside galleries, gunshots continue to ring out. About 4 minutes into the video, the officer opens fire with at least a dozen shots. The officer then continues running toward the shooter. Another officer then confirms the gunman is dead. The video ends with the 2 officers standing next to the shooter's body, which is blurred out. The video was released a day after a grand jury cleared the officer of wrongdoing, indicating that the use of force was justified under Texas law.
Some intense footage, but moving on now to some entertainment news. Madonna will postpone at least part of her Celebration World Tour. That's after spending several days in intensive care. The star's longtime manager posted on social media yesterday that Madonna developed a serious bacterial infection last Saturday. Her manager says she is improving and that a full recovery is expected. But the start of her Celebration tour will be pushed back. The tour was initially set to start July 15th in Vancouver, Canada. Other shows next month are expected to be rescheduled as well. Bacterial infections are pretty nasty, but luckily there are natural alternatives that can help protect us from them. Some herbal remedies can help prevent and treat infections, like, for example, echinacea and golden seal can be very effective. They can be taken as a tea or tincture at the onset of an infection or during change of the season, but even common household ingredients like manuka honey, garlic, and ginger are said to work pretty well when consumed.
Wow, that is fascinating, and it's good to know that we have natural alternatives to resort to instead of relying solely on these pharmaceutical treatments.
Yeah, exactly. Another common health issue here in the U.S. is obesity. A new study found differences in the brain can make it hard to lose weight. That's not all. Obesity could cause changes in the brain similar to Alzheimer's. I spoke to psychiatrist Dr. Jingduan Yang to get some answers.
What is new here is that they find the people who tend to be developed obesity, their brain is less reactive, or in terms of receiving award reactions in their brain, than the people who do not have the obesity issues. In other words, the people who don't have obesity issues, when they eat food, their brain, the area of the brain that give them sense of satisfaction, award light up. For the people who develop obesity, their brain reacted differently by not activating the part of the brain that gives them sense of satisfaction or reward. In this way, they don't get a sense of satisfaction or feel like they get enough pleasure from eating. So they keep eating more, therefore they begin to gain weight. So that's the biggest discovery in this study.
These changes that you just mentioned, they come after people have developed obesity, or is that something people develop beforehand or even are born with?
It is a very good question. This is simply what we observed at this point. Whether it is the case, or in other words, it is the cause of why these people developed the obesity because they had a brain problem to begin with, which is quite probable or possible because people's brain are different. Some people have a trouble to have that part of the structure of the brain being active. Also, there are biochemical components to it. For example, the dopamine is the neurotransmitters that are responsible for us to experience pleasure and feeling rewarded. But some people's brain does not produce enough dopamine, for example.
And I read that there is even similarity between those who are obese and those who have Alzheimer's. So just how similar are they? In other words, how worried should people be?
Well, people should be worried about obesity for many reasons, because they create metabolic syndromes, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, and diabetes, and all that can create heart disease and the stroke and all that. So that's number one, is the consequences of obesity. And the second thing is, the obesity could be a manifestation of brain problems, as this study indicated, and brain problem can be involved in development of Parkinson's disease, Alzheimer's disease, dementia, and depression, and other things. So that's need to be investigated and to see what was causing them to develop obesity could be also the reason that caused them to develop dementia or Alzheimer's disease and other neurological conditions.
So now that we know that there is brain changes involved, in terms of weight loss and obesity, how should people be treating this issue now?
Well, it has to take a comprehensive integrative approach. And a lot of people who develop obesity, for some reason they understand, some reason they don't. Genetics is not something visible, right? And all the biochemistry we're testing is something can be results of obesity, not necessarily cause of it. And also there is psychological and conditioned behavior. Certain people eat because of emotional need, even some physiological desires for eating. And if we don't uncover those things, and we will not be able to help people change their behavior. Because eating or not eating can be associated with a number of negative emotions and also past experience of our life, and which can be very complicated. If we don't get our head, our heart, our gut on the same page about losing weight, our behavior we will not be able to change our behavior in long term. That's why we make New Year resolution, and only 8% of people can carry out.
That's right. Thank you so much. Very good insights as usual, Dr. Jinduan Yang. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And now here's the thing, right? He said that for people that have this issue, lifestyle, exercise, stress management, and of course, eating habits can all regulate genetic expressions. So that means even though sometimes we can't reverse it completely, he says we can modify things with our good habits.
Yeah, and that is interesting because, genetics do play a big role in this, but there are some philosophies that say, there aren't any bad foods. It's just dependent on what type of person you are. Like, if you're relatively thin, you should eat more avocado and olive oil, but if you're, a little bit heavier, you might want to go for, rye bread and things like that. So, I don't know if you're, a sweet and sour type of person, but,
let's not go into that. I eat so much sugar, it's not healthy.
Well, and the thing is, if people eat, say, like potato chips, it's just one taste. It's just like sweet or like salty, but you really should get like a little bit of bitter and lemon, maybe some like a lemon on the side of the plate, because when your tongue gets all those, you get satiated, and that's when you feel full.
Wow, that's great to add it to this. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was very interesting.
Little tidbit, more you know, right?
Yeah.
Still to come, a nonprofit in California is doing all it can to help rescue dogs from around the world, including nearly 24 from China's meat trade. Get that story after the break.
Miss NTD, the first NTD Global Chinese Beauty Pageant. Miss NTD, let's make history together.
Is deep sea fish oil really healthy? Due to pollution in the oceans, most fish contain heavy metal elements and radioactive substances. That's why it's so important to choose a pure source of omega-3. Puritang green vegetable omega-3 is made from purslane and perilla seeds, which are rich in nutrients and minerals, especially vitamins A, D, E, calcium, and iron. With natural processing and no harmful chemical additives, it has more than 90% concentration of omegas 3, 6, 7, and 9. It effectively improves brain power and is beneficial to the heart's health. Puritang omega-3 does not smell of fish and contains no pollutants, so both adults and children can safely and easily consume it over a long period of time. Puritang green vegetable omega-3, greener, healthier, and more effective. Visit puritang.com to learn more.
Welcome back, everyone. A nonprofit in California is doing all it can to help rescue dogs from around the world. With their unconditional loyalty and compassion, these dogs are being offered an extraordinary opportunity. NTD's Christina Corona has more from Los Angeles.
On Tuesday, nearly 24 dogs were rescued from China's meat trade, and they have safely arrived here in Southern California. Rue's Kennel in Inglewood is their first destination before heading to their forever homes scattered across different locations in the United States. We spoke with Jill Stewart, the president and founder of China Rescue Dogs and Rue's Kennel, who says their goal is to rescue and rehabilitate dogs taken from China's meat trade.
We just had 20 dogs arrive from China late last night. As we all sadly know, that Yulin Dog Meat Festival is happening as we speak. These dogs, in collaboration with SPC International and WeatherTech, we decided to bring these dogs and save 20 or 30 more dogs during Yulin.
In the most recent Freedom Flight, a group of 16 golden retrievers, 2 corgis, a poodle, and a malamute were transported to safety.
And so we work with partnering shelters, we work with partnering rescues, and they help us collaborate. We have 4 shelters in China, and the dogs meet all the requirements, quarantine, vaccinations, everything that they need to be compliant to come into our country.
The consumption of dog meat is common in many countries, but not everyone in those countries support the practice.
In China, most people don't realize it's the #1 country in the world for brutality. There are no rights for animals. You can brutalize an animal on the street. You can skin it alive. The police have quotas. Many animals of this size cannot even be on the ground. They cannot go outside. They don't meet that.
When Jill started her nonprofit organization in 2019 with the mission of rescuing dogs, her goal was to help save dogs all throughout China. One lucky adopter got to meet her new furry friend on Tuesday. We spoke with Sue Grunfest, the founder of Love Dog Adventures Animal-Assisted Therapy Program, who drove from Las Vegas to pick up the latest addition to her family.
So we're happy he made the long trip. I was very worried. Such a small dog to travel so many flights and so little. And I've been in touch with his contact in China all along the way. We have to send her pictures soon. She was very concerned for him and took very good care of him. We are so pleased with the care.
Christina Corona, NTD News, Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, what a noble cause that she's doing.
Yeah, I agree. And so good to know. I really liked hearing about it, especially knowing that Yulin Festival is happening, because it's so horrific, right? It's terrible. It's the pictures and videos that are coming from there.
Those poor dogs. And you know, that one dog had to take so many flights. I wonder what it's like to fly as a dog. I mean, do they know to pop their ears?
Oh, good question. Asking the real
Hopefully.
questions here.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully. Otherwise, that will be a hell of a flight. All right. That's all for today's program. We'd love to hear from you at goodmorning@ntd.com. That's our email address if you would like to send us some feedback. Thanks for watching. I'm Evelyn Lee.
And I'm Kevin Hogan.
Thanks for watching us on YouTube. Did you know YouTube only keeps selective videos on its platform? So if you want to make sure you get the full picture, just subscribe to our newsletter. Go to newsletter.ntd.com and sign up. It's free.